Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Qué Golazo podcast. We are your hosts for today, Heath, Pearce, Jimmy, Conrad, which means we're talking CONCACAF football. We're talking U.S. men's national team. But first, make sure you follow Qué Golazo wherever you get your podcast and leave us a rating and a review. It only takes a few seconds, and it helps provide you guys with great free content. Also, subscribe to our page on YouTube, youtube.com/Qué Golazo, and hit the notification bell to catch all of our latest videos. Today, myself, Heath Pearce, and Jimmy Conrad, we are talking about the potential roster that Gregg Berhalter should be calling in. Will he call them in? We don't know. Jimmy Conrad, what is going on?
I'm excited, Heath. It seems like almost a lifetime ago that we had our international break, so I'm ready and warmed up for the next one. But there are some complications, and I think everybody should know this going into this upcoming international break. We didn't get hit too hard with it last time around because of the UK travel restrictions, didn't have El Salvador or Honduras on the red flag list, but they do have Panama this time around, which means all of our players that are coming from the UK, we're talking, it could be Christian Pulisic, it could be Zach Steffen, lots of guys that are coming from this area of the world might not be able to play in Panama. Or if they do take that risk and go through those extreme measures to play there, they might have to quarantine for 10 to 14 days when they go back to the UK. So there's a lot to unpack here, which I think will give opportunities to other players to step up, which we saw in the second half of the Honduras, that when you actually put in some players that are hungry, maybe that ends up leading to 4 goals in one half. You know what I'm talking about, Heath? You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about. Plus, I mean, our Steffen and Pulisic really starters at this point in this national team. We're a national team that's all about fight. We're a national team that's all about fight. We need not to say those guys aren't. I'm just kidding.
But, I know.
You know, in terms of looking at the roster, obviously it's different than the generation you and I were in, where the call-up pool was smaller, right? You're talking about 2 qualifiers, is a little bit more compact of a group, so to speak. Whereas now we're talking about 26 players or more being called into these camps. So I wanted to start, I guess, off of the last call-up. Are there any players that we know will be out or not featuring? Obviously, you have some injury concerns with Pulisic, with Gio Reyna. Mm-hmm. Is there anybody on that list that you've seen that's for sure out for this?
No, those are the 2 biggest names. I think the 2 most influential that could obviously hurt our attack on that side of the ball. There is something else to take into consideration with yellow card accumulation. So right now we have 5 players: McKinney, DeAndre Yedlin, John Brooks, Tyler Adams, and Jordan Pifuk. They saw yellow in the opening window, and if you get a second yellow, it's an automatic 1-game suspension. So
and that's at any point.
At any point. So that has to be taken into consideration as well. Like, do you want me to take a yellow in this one? You know, so I have to sit out the Panama game when I'm not actually allowed to travel there anyway. These are just things to think about in terms of the gamesmanship of how to navigate the high seas of qualifying in CONCACAF in particular. So there are some pieces of, I think, somewhat of a complicated puzzle as to who's going to be available and how we manage the team moving forward. So in terms of injury concerns, you throw that in with the yellow card accumulation and somewhat of this travel situation, and I think it gets a little dicey for Berhalter and who he's going to start, because we know we can all raise our hand, and he acknowledged it as well. When you make 3 subs at halftime, I think you're acknowledging that you didn't start the right 11. He has to get this 11 right so that we're not falling behind and that we're in charge every time we play, especially against these teams that are upcoming that we have 2 of the 3 are home games. We got to take all 4. We got to get all 6 points in our 2 home games.
Yeah, I was with Sebastian Leggett actually by chance last night. We were doing this Verizon Next Level, which I'm sure you've seen that runs in the post game shows on Paramount Plus. And we were talking just about, again, the same things, right? We had a chance to look each other in the eyes and talk about what it's like to go down to these games and how it's not enough to just be a good player in your team, right? You're looking at a young squad of players, many of which are young stars, but aren't the leaders of their teams, right? They're not the ones that the team necessarily looks to when you're Christian Pulisic. Yeah, you got to contribute, but you've got a bunch of stars around you. Gio Reyna, you've got Holland next to you. Yeah, you're going to play, and maybe you're going to play 60 minutes, or maybe you're not going to start a game. And previously you had other players of quality, but now they've gotten a taste of what it's going to take, right? And I think that fighting spirit, and he mentioned that there was this pride in the team of how they play going into some of these games. And it's hard to not have that when you're a young player, used to playing beautiful football. You're used to teams respecting you more in your club level. And I think this last go around has given them some crucial experience. I think the summer helped. And then now you played a couple of away qualifiers. Do you think that has taught them? And do you think that will change because we'll get into the players that you think are coming in. Do you think that'll change, I guess, how you roll out at home? Because now they've gotten some away experience. Do you think they've, all bets are off and now they just scrap for everything, including at home?
Well, I think they might need a reintroduction. What I think was a super positive for us with regard to the 3 games in the last qualifying window was the fact that we played our best half in the last game. So everybody's feeling pretty good about our fortunes. Had we had that half in the first game of the first half, then and we have a really crappy, last game and maybe we lose or don't get the result that we want, then everybody's kind of feeling like Eeyores, to use a Winnie the Pooh example. Oh man, I'm feeling sorry for ourselves. We should have played better. But now everything's great. I got a little Pepi in my steppy. You know what I'm saying? So everything's on the up and up. Everything feels good. It feels like, to your point and what Leggett said as well, not only is there pride, but there's some momentum and there's something we can build off of heading into the next qualifying window. So I think that's all positive. But I do think that, and we mentioned this a lot, the Mike Tyson quote, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And I feel like every game in CONCACAF, you're going to get punched in the face. And I'm hopeful that because of this experience in the first qualifying window, that'll allow us to get that punch out of the way. We can get back to our plan and solve problems. Because I think what we learned in that first qualifying window, Heath, was that we didn't necessarily adapt quickly to when plan A wasn't working. And we looked frustrated that maybe even plan B wasn't working either. So what are we going to do now? And it looked like we solved that a little bit in that second half against Honduras, but there's still some questions there, which really leads us to the players that are going to eventually come in.
Yeah, and look, by the way, if you guys want to learn more about Gianluca Busio or Ricardo Pepi, you can find those on the Qué Golazo YouTube page. Qué Golazo had a chance to sit down with those guys recently and talk to them more about just the moments that they're in, both of them in exciting moments in their career. Speaking of Busio and Pepi, Jimmy, let's talk a little bit about who you think should be called in that perhaps wasn't, for a number of reasons, right? And I'll throw some names off the top. Chris Richards, Matthew Hoppe.
Okay.
You've got
you got Tim Weah.
Tim Weah.
I'll jump in with it.
Okay, hold on.
Go ahead.
And Yunus Musa. All crucial parts of what I think the team was lacking at different times. Are any of them all ins? And if they are, who's out?
I would say, well, I guess it depends on injury. If Pulisic and Reyna are out, then Timothy Weah makes perfect sense. So does Matthew Hoppe. Now, I did see an interview with Matthew Hoppe who mentioned that one of his beefs with Gregg Berhalter during the Gold Cup was that he was putting him out as a winger and he wanted to play up top. And I find that to be interesting because I feel like Hoppe, in some ways, because he's pissed about being out wide, actually gives him that edge and that swagger that we kind of need from that position. So I don't really necessarily know if I want Berhalter to change that. I like a little pissed off Matthew Hoppe, who does have some Clint Dempsey vibes to him, not only in terms of how he plays, but also his confidence off the field and how much he believes in himself. So keep an eye on this Matthew Hoppe experiment at the winger side, especially if Ricardo Pepi continues to take steps. And I would start Pepi at this point. Now, Timothy Weah just came back from a thigh injury. He was a 62nd minute substitute over the weekend. So we'll see how he is, but I think in a couple weeks he should be fine. Yunus Musa actually came on. Carlos Soler for Valencia against Madrid got hurt early on, so Musa got 75 minutes, which is probably a little bit longer than they wanted to because he's coming back from injury. What I find interesting about Musa is he's actually still not cap tied, even though verbally pledging to play for us. So him getting in a World Cup qualifier would seal that deal. But with the Weston McKennie situation and how Gregg's going to manage that moving forward, Yunus Musa obviously would be a nice alternative to that particular area. Matthew Hoppe, as we said, already looking pretty sharp for Mallorca, scored an offside goal, but his movement was good there, had an assist on the weekend against Real Madrid. So he definitely has something to his game. Obviously, that's going to be a good option for us. Again, if Reyna and Pulisic are not available. In the back line, John Anthony Brooks hasn't looked that sharp this season, both for club and country. So maybe Matt Miazga, who's with Alaves right now in Spain. I'll raise my hand and say I'm not the biggest Miazga fan because I always feel like there's one big mistake per half potentially in this guy. But if you wanted to bring him back in and we were feeling a little thin there, Mark McKenzie, unfortunately, isn't getting many minutes with Genk. So I love McKenzie. I hope he continues to get minutes, but it could be an option to bring in Miazga. You got Giacchini, who has made the move from the second division in France to the first division. So he's at Montpellier now. He's only played about 38 minutes, not getting a lot of minutes, but at least he's back in the top division in France. Joe Scally is another player we could potentially bring in from Borussia Mönchengladbach as an option on either side. If you're thinking that Dest or Anthony Robinson or DeAndre Yedlin. And then we got Busio, of course, now getting settled at Venezia. Jossie Zardes is another option. Paul Areola, Sean Johnson. I mean, there's quite a few players that we can bring in to fill those gaps and players that I'm confident in.
But here's the thing, Jimmy. You're talking about filling gaps is one thing, right? But we've got gaps in what's going to be our best team. You talk about Mark McKenzie. I think he did play 90 over the weekend, which I think is a great thing for his confidence. But one of the things about him, and obviously he's one of the guys that I'm closest to on the team, is that when they switched to a back four, he became a lockdown defender.
Right.
And when to the current standard and crop of players that we have, I was happy with a lockdown defender. I don't care if he can play out of the back or hit a long switch or build up and these types of things. We came into that moment. They switched to a back four again, and everything was 50-50 challenge. Give it to the guy who's better on the ball next to you. Hit the ball wide, clear the lines, do all these things that make it really tough on defenders or on attackers. And I think the reason I'm getting to that point is you listed 30 plus players, right? If you add the players that were in camp and the players that we've listed, you've now got to whittle that down into a team that's going to get you results. Home and away, very different ways that you're going to play. But if at any point this team forgets what it takes to get results, right? And that's that fight. The fight is over everything, even at home. If you don't set the tone with the fight, if you're not going to do that, if you don't throw out this idea of where you play and who you play with on a regular basis, they're going to struggle. And so I'm having trouble. And I think your names were great. There's not really anybody. There's a couple guys in Scandinavia that are scoring goals. I think what's his name at Odense, like 23 years old. I can't remember his name right now, but they're guys that are like peripheral players that you kind of want to bring them in and sort of see how they can do. Sometimes you see a spark where they come back. They haven't been in the national team pools for a while. They come back and you see a different side of them. They rise to the occasion, similar to Conrad de la Fuente, who looked out of his depths when he first came into the national team. So I wouldn't say that there's any players, at least off the top of my head, that are missing. You have Julian Araujo, who's still sort of on the verge of deciding who he is going to play for. I think Yunus Musa is not cap tied, but I think he's pretty set in stone.
Yeah,
he's set in terms of his intentions. And these guys are so young, you want to get them in. But what you don't want to do on the flip side, right, is we're talking about 30 to 40 players. You don't want to create this pool of players that are so big that you're starting to lose this cohesion, right? So if I'm Gregg Berhalter, right, and I'm managing this situation right now, I'm like, give me the guys that are going to fight, right? Matthew Hoppe, right away, no problem. At least I know whether I play him late or I start him, there's going to be an energy. We're only talking about Tyler Adams and his performances because of his energy. I'm giving Mark McKenzie credit because of his energy in the second half of that game. Sebastian Lletget, his energy. Brendan Aronson, his energy. Those things are infectious within this team. And when you start with somebody around, and when your guys are buzzing in these games, there's a level of confidence around you going like, okay, let's go. And like, I'm actually getting goosebumps saying that right now. There's that like feeling where you're like, okay, today's our day, as opposed to this like rhythmic settling down. You have to be so good to do that and break a team down. And again, go back to the first 10 minutes of El Salvador. I thought we had that, but then if you don't finish that first chance like we had in the air with, I think it was Robinson had a big chance in the air. It starts to change the game, and you need to have people that like energy high at a minimum, subs that are going to come in and change that dynamic. And so I look to that second half again, and I go back to saying, give me my fighters to start. And I know that's so unattractive for the soccer fan right now, for the U.S. soccer fan, knowing how much quality that we have. But we can win out later on in games. We can win out once we've won that first battle, which is like, we're going to fight like hell, and then everything comes in. Is Musa a potential starter for you at this point? Is Hoppe a potential starter because of those attributes?
Yeah, I think so. I would like to see Yunus Musa, assuming he's continuing to get some solid minutes and regaining that sharpness that I think is very important. Now, we start with Jamaica at home. We probably should have started with the schedule. Jamaica have been underperforming to the nth degree, as I like to say, even with the additions of Mikel
Which scares me, by the way. I hate the idea of that against the U.S. I agree. The idea of that.
But they haven't looked good, and I feel like they're trying to add these luxury players to add depth. But sometimes what I think what we're talking about with the U.S. is similar to what Jamaica needs. When they go out there and decide that, hey, we don't need a Mikel Antonio, we're going to go out there and fight and try to get results, that's when you actually see this necessary component to have success in CONCACAF. And when they did have all those players, was that home game against Panama. They lost 3-0. And the other games, they were in there. Costa Rica, they were fighting. They were in it with Mexico at Estadio Azteca till the very end. And so they need to find that balance of their luxury players and their heavily creative players, and also the ones that can fight. And that's, I think, going to be the challenge for Berhalter. we really need to score this first goal against Jamaica. We need it to just set the tone. We need it to make sure that, okay, we can build off of that half that we had against Honduras. We're leaning into that. That's what makes us special. And so that's going to be really important. With regard to Musa, he can be a very, like, he's the connective tissue, right? He can help us transition from defense to attack. I think he's got good defensive acumen as well. So he's good at blocking passing lanes. And I kind of want to see that partnership with him and Tyler Adams just to really know for sure. Because we've already tried a few different combinations and put Tyler Adams out wide right and all kinds of different stuff. So I'm hoping that we can start to, with these next 3 games, start to settle in a little bit, because then we go away to Panama. And as I mentioned, we're probably not going to have the UK-based players, maybe even some other Europeans that are got that red flag tag against Panama. So that's going to be a really interesting team as well, which could be more heavily MLS in some ways. Now, I just want to throw out there really quick about Mark McKenzie. He did play 90 on the weekend, but against Royal Antwerp yesterday, he didn't play at all. And Royal Antwerp scored 4 goals against Genk. So that's just a good sign for Mark McKenzie. Get him back in the lineup, everybody. Get him back in the lineup.
Jimmy, you mentioned Pepi starting. That you think he should start. Is there any other strikers that you think should be getting the call up that aren't right now? And then I guess the double barrel to this question is, we saw John Anthony Brooks, one of the best defenders in the Bundesliga, across the board, not from an American standpoint, struggle in this last qualifying round as from being a leader to making the plays that you need from somebody with the experience that we have on the field. Is Chris Richards an opportunity? Is that an opportunity to start for him? And then up front, is there another striker that you're looking at to come into camp?
I would love to see Chris Richards come in. I think his upside is tremendous. I don't think we are even close to what he's capable of and his potential. He just needs, as you know, as a defender, and everybody knows, when you start to get a little bit older, you've seen now thousands and thousands of plays. You've seen all these repetitions and the angles. You're just starting to get a little bit more confident in who you are in terms of as a defender and how you bring presence to the position. He's still young. So I think getting him those opportunities, even to be around the team, would be really important just to get these minutes. So I hope Chris Richards gets called in. I don't know if he will. I think that Miles Robinson is really starting to lock down one of those positions. And given how well we played without John Anthony Brooks in the team and how well he didn't play, let's say, for other key moments for us during that first qualifying window, I don't know. I mean, you bring him in, of course. He's one of the leaders, one of the oldest players we have on the team. But hey, form is form. And if you're not doing the job, then maybe you have to think about some other players. I don't know.
By the way, you mentioned Chris Richards and the experience of that. I've talked to a number of these players after this last camp, and many of them that didn't play. We're talking about like, oh man, like even from the sideline, you could feel like the experience of going down to CONCACAF and feeling that. Similar to the guys in the Gold Cup. Yunus Musa talked about in the Gold Cup, not the Gold Cup, sorry, the Nations League final, the atmosphere. Like the craziness of it. He was like, oh my gosh, I'd never felt anything like that in my life on the sideline, like, and from the sideline. And I think having those experiences are super important for these guys to get this, because again, like you said, you want to have the problem I think that we have is you have a number of players who've been through these repetitions, but you haven't done it. You haven't been through that in CONCACAF. You haven't been through that when, every one of these 50-50 balls that I win all the time is somehow not coming to me anymore. And it's bouncing the other way. And the ball is bouncing funny. And this crowd is hostile and all these types of things. So I just wanted to point that out.
It's important. Bringing them in. I mean, when I got first called in, one of my first big games was a World Cup qualifier against Trinidad in Trinidad. I was roommates with Casey Keller. So even going through that process, even though I wasn't starting, seeing how somebody else prepares for a game of this magnitude. And then you go into the locker room, like watching Eddie Pope. How is he going to get ready for this game? So yes, all these little things matter, because then it starts to give you confidence in how you are going to visualize what you do when you're actually in that position, and then passing on, paying it forward, right, to the next generation that's going to do the same. Now, really quick about the number 9 spot, I would actually consider bringing in Jossie Zardes. I know that people either love or hate that guy. I don't care if you love or hate any of the players. If they're going to go out there and do the job, and they can be people we can count on and give an effort that's consistent, Jossie Zardes should be considered, especially if we can't use Josh Sargent or any other players for that Panama game away from home. So I would bring in Jossie. He's starting to score goals for Columbus Crew again, and a confident Jossie is one that I'm a big fan of. And obviously Matthew Hoppe, Timothy Weah, keep bringing in Conrad de la Fuente. I mean, we're going to have some options. Obviously, we're all big question marks, Pulisic and Reyna. I'm just going to expect that they're not going to start, because even if they come back in time, they've been sitting out for, at that point, it'll be close to a month. I don't know how sharp they're going to be. So if those guys can come in, imagine having the depth on our team that Reyna and Pulisic can be our super subs. So I think we're going to be fine. My hope and my expectation is a minimum 7 points through these 3 games. We have Jamaica at home, we have Panama away, and then we have Costa Rica at home. 2 of those 3 teams, especially the 2 that we're playing at home, are struggling right now. They're going to come. They're going to fight in a different way, because if they don't get something out of this window, to your point earlier, Heath, and this will be my final thought, with regard to Jamaica and Costa Rica, if they don't get anything out of this qualifying window, it's going to look pretty bleak for them moving forward about qualifying for this World Cup. So I feel like we might see this hunger and desperation that maybe didn't exist in the first qualifying window because it was still new. And now their backs are against the wall. And that makes me a little bit nervous, everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that, and I just think that Jamaica is the one where it's like, let's punch them while they're down, like let's because
that's why we have to score first. We have to score first.
They're gonna come back later, and by the way, everybody, Jimmy and I will be with you throughout the upcoming qualifiers, from previews to reviews, talking about all these things.
We do.
As we do, and it'll be a lot of fun. So make sure you guys stay tuned on those types of things. But yeah, I agree, Jimmy. We need to take advantage of those. I think 7 points is at a minimum. I think there should be a goal of 9 points. I think there's a belief that we can win on the road now, which we didn't have when we were previously talking about 1 point on the road, especially with the quality that we have. If the fight is the bar that we set, and then you have the quality that we now have, I think there's an opportunity there. So 9 points, maybe that's putting too much pressure on them, but 7 points for sure. And then, yeah, getting these teams, because Jamaica's going to take points from people later on. Costa Rica is going to find a way to start taking points from people. And we don't want to be the ones that they find their form against. So any other final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, I'm just going to say, just to update everybody on the table, Mexico's on top with 7 points. Canada has 5. We have 5. Panama has 5. Costa Rica, Honduras, El Salvador all have 2. And Jamaica just have 1. We get them first. As he says, we got to punch them in the face. We have to score first. And it's going to be up to Gregg to get that lineup right. And that comes with the job. So I'm excited. And I'm excited to be here with you, Heath, for this journey, and for everybody listening. We love the U.S. men's national team. And obviously, we want to see them do well and qualify for a World Cup. I'm having withdrawals. It's been too long, Heath.
I love it, Jimmy. I love it. And guys, as a reminder, we're expecting Gregg with 2 G's to drop his 26-man roster very, very soon. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And make sure you're following the Qué Golazo pod across all platforms, whether audio or video, so that you can make sure that you are getting these videos and joining in on the conversation. Thank you so much, Jimmy Conrad.
Thank you, Heath. Thanks for everybody for listening and watching.
See you guys later.